Hello everyone, welcome to Macroeconomics Unit 1 by Bizinstitution. So here are the table of contents or the concepts we're going to learn in this unit. The first one is scarcity, then we move on to opportunity cost and the production possibility curve. Then we look at comparative advantage and trade, then the concepts of supply and demand, and market equilibrium is the final one, which actually connects the concepts of supply and demand. So scarcity. What is scarcity? So basically, scarcity focuses on how businesses, individuals, and society as a whole have unlimited wants but limited resources. This is seen in many ways, for example. So if I go to GameStop and I want this new video game, but they're out of stock, that's an example of scarcity because I have a want for it, but it's not possible to satisfy because of the limited resources in this world. But you may ask yourself, why are there limited resources in this world? Why can't there be an unlimited amount of resources? Well, that's because other factors of production. So the factors of productions are the factors that are used to make goods and services, and they are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And now, if you look at each of these factors, for example, land is limited on this earth, labor is limited on this earth, capital is limited on this earth, and so is entrepreneurship. Everything is limited. So if everything used to make these goods and services are limited, then every goods and services is also limited, and hence we have to pick and choose which one of our wants we want to satisfy. This actually perfectly ties into our next concept, which is the opportunity cost and the production possibility curve. So what is the opportunity cost? The next best alternative given up when a choice is made is known as opportunity cost. So this is a crucial concept that actually explains many concepts in economics. So for example, over here, as you can see in the image, there is oranges, blueberries, and an apple. So for example, out of here, I can only eat one of the fruits. So I choose to eat the orange. That means I cannot eat the apple and the blueberries. So this actually shows the concept of opportunity cost, as eating the orange means I can only satisfy my want for the orange because I just don't want to eat the other one. I can't eat the other apple. So but make sure that the opportunity cost is always the next best alternative that you give up. So if I'm eating the orange, for example, I have two options. I have two things that I'm actually giving up: the apples and the blueberries. Well, the next best thing that I then gave up was the apple, because after orange, my second preference is apples. So technically, the opportunity cost of eating one orange would be an apple over here. And that ties into the production possibility curve, which is the next part of this topic. So the production possibility curve is a curve which shows the various amount of combinations of the two goods that can be produced. So, for example, if you look at the graph over here, bicycles and tricycles, those are the two goods that it shows. So, for example, if I want to make two tricycles, it's only possible for me to make two bicycles. So, if I make four bicycles over here, I can only make one tricycle. So, if kind of you know what I'm getting at, it basically shows that how much of one good can you produce if you're producing this amount of the other good. So now, if you think about it, what does the slope of the production possibility curve show? Well, if we said opportunity cost, you would be 100% right, actually, because that's how if you look at here, this is a constant line, which means it has a slope. So for every two bicycles I make, I'm giving away one tricycle. And so this line has a slope of 2, which makes sense actually, and hence why the production possibility curve will always be downward sloping. Because if you're making more of one good, you're giving away the other good. And you might also notice that I have two production quality curves here. One is as a curved and one is a straight line. Well, the thing is, uh, the a straight line means there's a constant opportunity cost. So for every two bicycles, I'm 100% giving up one tricycle. But for over here, good Z and good Y, the more and more I go down, the more and more I give away. So I'm making more good Y. That means, so for example, if I'm making 95 good Y, I can only make 40. But if I'm going for 60, then I can only make 90. As you can see, every time you produce an additional good Y, you give up more and more of the good Z. Now, another crucial point about the production possibility curve you may know is looking at the third graph over here. Any line that's on the point here is associated with the choice as full employment and a stable economy. That means the economy is producing more and more, and it is good. Point I and U are actually point I would be an inefficient because the economy isn't producing at what it usually can produce, and point U is actually unattainable because society just doesn't have the tools required to achieve point two, like the achieve the combination of good U. Well, is it ever possible to go to good U? Well, yes, actually it is. So as technology improves, so does the tools and more goods and services can be produced. That means an economy will grow and more the PPC will shift to right. Can the PPC actually shift to left and decrease? Well, obviously, yes. Well, we see that many times in a recession where the economy goes down, goods aren't being produced that much. So obviously, the PPC shifts inwards and more towards point I. Maybe point I can even become full employment at that point of time. One last point that I want to know is about the point out about is the difference between consumer goods and capital goods. Production possibility curves are most often used for these two type of goods. The more capital goods you actually produce, so over here, if I'm producing 4 capital goods and no consumer goods, my economy will grow faster. If I was to be producing 3 capital goods or 15 consumer goods, well, you may ask, why would you want to produce consumer goods? Well, consumer goods are for the consumers. Well, they want, of course, they want consumer goods. So that's why it's important to have a balance between the two. So you need to grow the economy. Let's look at topic 3 now, comparative advantage and trade. Comparative advantage. Well, one is said to have a comparative advantage in producing something if you can produce it at a lower cost than anyone else. Now, you might don't get it confused with absolute advantage, which is just an advantage that you can produce more of something. Comparative advantage is used for goods and services. So, for example, if for every 2 fans I produce one, I can only produce one charger, then and another guy can produce 3 fans for one charger. Well, he's giving up when every time he produces a charger, he's giving up 3 fans, and I'm only giving up two. So he might have an absolute advantage in fans, but I have the comparative advantage because I can produce, because I'm giving up less of a fan every time I make a charger, if that makes sense. Let's look at it in a table and 2 countries with an actual example. So over here, the two goods being produced are cars and computers, and the 2 countries we chose are United Kingdom and the USA. So for example, the United Kingdom over here produces 30 cars and only 10 computers, whereas the United States produces 40 cars and 20 computers. So when you look at this, for example, these 2 countries try to trade, you're looking at, well, the US can produce most of these goods. Well, they have an absolute advantage in both of them. They can produce more of them. Why would they even want to with the United Kingdom? Well, again, resources are limited. They in the production possibility curve, if you put 40 on the cars, they won't be able to have 20 computers. Hence why they need to look at both areas to trade. And if you see over here, for every half a computer, for every car they make, they give away half a computer and they give away 2 cars per computer they make. Similarly, over here, 3 computers are made per car, and here 1/3 car per computer. So what we understand is how 2 countries, if these two were to interact, they would trade is, well, as you can see, United States have a comparative advantage in producing cars, and as they're giving because they're only giving away half of a computer, whereas the UK are giving away 3. Then in the computer side is the opposite. The United Kingdom have the comparative advantage as they're giving away less cars. Hence, I'd like to say, if these two continue to trade, the United States would specialize in in cars, whereas United Kingdom would specialize in the computers. This will make it so that when both of these countries actually trade, they'll be able to expand their limits from the production possibility curve because they've been able to specialize in one good and make the good that they're the best at making. Now, one common trick to be followed: if you have the absolute advantage in making a certain good, that does not mean you'll have the comparative advantage in making the good too. Because as we can see, United States have the comparative absolute advantage in making computers here, but they do not have the comparative advantage. Next, let's look at topic 4, which is the topic of supply and demand. So what is the law of demand? Well, basically it says, if you just think about it, if I went to a store and they're selling a bottle of water for 50 cents and another store is selling it for 25 cents, the exact same bottle of water, of course I'm going to buy more from the other store which is selling it for 25 cents. Well, exactly here, that's what the law of demand states. The lower the price of the good, the higher demand there is. Hence, quantity demanded and price have an inverse relationship, as you can see on the graph. So the lower the prices, the higher the quantity, and the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Now, a point to be noted is don't get confused between quantity demanded and demand. Those are actually two separate things, which I'll talk about just in a minute. Now let's look at the law of supply. Well, if I'm a producer, obviously I want to make the most profit I can. So the higher someone is paying me, the higher I'm going to, the more quantity I'm going to increase. So basically, the law of supply says the higher the price of the good, the higher supply there is. Hence, quantity supplied and price have a direct relationship. Now let's look at the shifters of the demand graph. So before I go on, I want to help you understand the difference between demand and quantity demanded. So basically, quantity demanded on this line, so for example here, this is the quantity demanded would be the amount I'm demanding in this demand curve, in this exact demand line. The demand can shift. This line actually can shift right. If it shifts right, that means at every price I'm demanding a bit more. If it the curve shifts left, that means for every shifts left, I'm for every price I'm actually uh demanding less. Same with the law of supply. If you shift the whole curve itself, then you say the supply shifted, and that means that for every price more there's more supply. So now, how does these curves shift? Well, basically, there's a few simple factors to know. The first is taste and preferences, and if I'm a consumer and I'm starting to like this good, the overall demand or the whole demand curve will increase to the right. Vice versa, if I'm not liking good and less people are buying it, the quantity demanded will go down. Then the price of related goods, for example, now. So what is a complement or related good, a complement or supplement? Well, let's look at some examples. As you can see, a fork and a spoon at some instances might be a supplement. So hence, the more people are demanding spoon, then the demand for the forks go down. Well, then what's a complement exactly? Well, a complement are things that complement each other. For example, if the sale of milk goes up, if the demand of milk goes up, the demand of cereal might go up too, because those two are complements, they go hand in hand. So if the demand of the complement increase, the demand of your good will also increase, and if the demand of a supplement increases, then the demand of your good will actually decrease. The number of consumers, it's simply if there's more consumers demanding something, the demand increases. The expectations of future products. This is to understand. So for today, going back to my water bottle example, if I think today it's 50 cents, but tomorrow it'll go around to 25 cents, I'm obviously going to wait for tomorrow. So the demand today goes down. However, tomorrow, if people expect it to go down, the demand for tomorrow will go up. Now let's look at the supply shifters. So prices of resources. So it's simply that if I'm making, if my all the commodities, all the inputs that I put into my good are the prices of that increase, then it's gonna need me to make more money to make a profit. So obviously the supply will shift left. Improvement in technology. If it becomes easier for me to make my good, then the supply will go right. Or the supply will shift right. And government action, for example, if they increase taxes or if they give subsidies to help out the businesses, then that means the supply will, if it's increasing the tax, then the supply will shift left because again, it's harder for me to produce the same amount of goods. And then the last factor is expectations of future profit, which is very similar. If I think that tomorrow I'm going to be able to sell a good higher than the price is today, I'm going to decrease the supply today and wait for tomorrow when I can make more money out of it. So that basically goes on with the topics of supply and demand. Now let's look at market equilibrium. So the market equilibrium is basically the point where the supply and demand graph intersect. This point is known as market equilibrium simply. So at this point over here, you can see that if you produce at the, if the supplier supplies this amount, and if the demand is at this amount, then that's exactly where how much quantity you should have, and that's exactly the price that should be. Because over here, for example, if you the suppliers supplying this many amounts, but the demand is somewhere low or over here or very low, for example, then that would cause a surplus. And if the supply over here and the demand is very high, then that will create a shortage because more people are wanting it. Hence, where this point shows the suppliers and the consumers where which at which exactly price and at which quantity is right for there to be no shortage or no surplus. Now, the supply and demand, as I told you in the previous topic, that these curves do shift and they do have an effect on the equilibrium market. For example, if your demand curve shifts left, the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity go down. If vice versa, if my demand curve shift right, the price and quantity of the goods go up. But now in the supply, it's an inverse relationship actually. So if the prices go up, if my supply curve shifts left, the price will go up, but the equilibrium quantity will go down. And similarly, if the supply curve shifts right, the price will go down and the quantity will go up. So these are just points that you'll have to memorize, or you can also visualize on the graph. Now the double shift rule. So what happens if both of the curves shift? Well, that's when we know that either the equilibrium price or the equilibrium quantity will be undetermined. It'll be impossible without actually seeing the graph to know what will happen in the market. But a general rule of thumb to know is that if the demand curve shifts down, the supply curve is going up, the quantity will be undetermined, but the price we know for sure will be going down. On the opposite side, if the demand curve shift right, supply goes left, the quantity is still undetermined, but we know the price will go up for sure. And if the demand and supply curve are both shifting in the same ways, we know that the equilibrium price will be undetermined, but if they both increase, then the equilibrium quantity also increases, and if they both decrease, the quantity also decreases. So that basically is the whole unit one. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.